At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
Hi, this is Malcolm Bruce from Sons of Cream. You're listening to the Dr. Sky Experience on Talk Radio 77 on WABC.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Dr. Sky Experience, proudly heard here on Talk Radio 77 WABC. We like to call it the crown jewel of radio, the iconic 77 Talk Radio WABC, beaming out of New York City, the nation, the world, and I'm even sure the cosmos. Well, our Dr. Sky Experience, for many of you know, we talk about not only the story of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, but with celebrity guests in the mix, musical guests, and so much more. And producing our show today is the incredible Dr. D. And we do, ladies and gentlemen, appreciate your time with us on this most powerful radio station. Today, we're going to reminisce. We're going to be talking about the Sons of Cream, an excellent band that's coming here to Phoenix, Arizona on March the 11th at the Music Theater, the Music Instrument Museum Theater, March the 11th, traveling all over the nation and around the world. We're going to be introducing our special guest today, one of the members of Son of Cream. That is the legendary bassist on vocals, Malcolm Bruce. But a little bit about the band. The band Cream, one of the first big rock supergroups to emerge from the British rhythm and blues movement of the 1960s. They fused their love of blues with elements of pop, rock, psychedelia, folk, and African rhythms, producing an unprecedented blend of superlative songwriting and powerful improvisations. Our very special guest today, composer, singer, songwriter, and multi-instrument talented Malcolm Bruce, has toured, performed, recorded, and appeared on records with some of the biggest names in the music industry, including Little Richard, Elton John, Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, Dr. John, Steve Cropper, Joe Satriani, the legendary Joe Bonamassa, Bill Ward, Ozzy Osbourne, Simon Phillips, Leslie West, the list goes on. Let's say hello to our special guest. Malcolm, welcome to this edition of the Dr. Sky Experience. How are you today, my friend?
Hey, that was an amazing introduction. I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. Appreciate it.
Well, it's always a privilege and honor. This is incredible. I mean, we have 3 individuals traveling in the recognition of Cream, but now the Sons of Cream, we have Malcolm Bruce, bassist on vocals. We're going to be talking about Kofi Baker, the son of the great legendary Ginger Baker. What, Malcolm, one of the best drummers in the entire world, and also traveling with you folks is the grandnephew, if I'm correct, of Ginger Baker, Robert Johnson on guitar. So talk to us about this. You obviously have this great legacy. Tell me, amazing, what was the story of your dad? Of course, let's hear a little bit about Jack Bruce. I mean, another one who's listed as probably one of the most influential bassists of all time. Talk about your dad for a moment. I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah, well, my dad was born in Scotland. He's a Glaswegian, born in Glasgow. And really, my dad, along with Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker, they were at the beginning of what would be termed the British R&B boom of starting in the very early 1960s, around 61, 62. Even earlier than that, a British-Greek guitar player called Alexis Corner was acting as a promoter in London and the UK, bringing people like Muddy Waters over in the late 50s, like 1959 onwards. And then Alexis put together a band called Alexis Corner's Blues Incorporated. My dad eventually joined that band. Charlie Watts was on drums. This is all before the Rolling Stones, so, people like Mick Jagger would come to their early shows and ask to sit in. And then when the Rolling Stones formed, Charlie Watts left to join and become, obviously, the legendary drummer of that band. And Ginger Baker became the drummer in Alexis Alexis Corner's band. And then they went through, you know, lots of these different bands. So we're talking about 1961, 62, playing at venues like the Marquee and the Ealing Club. And so many bands from that only a few years later became famous came from that early scene where there were just a handful of musicians and a hardcore group of fans. In fact, my mum, Janet, who still lives in London, you know, she met my dad when she was a teenager because she loved the music. So she was going dancing as a school kid, really a 16-year-old kid on that scene, just loved the music and happened to meet my dad and they fell in love. She was 16, my dad was 19. And,
oh, wow.
You know, and then just a few years later, you know, my dad had gone through a bunch of different bands. He was with John Mayall briefly, so was Eric, obviously. My dad was in Manfred Mann for a short amount of time, played in lots of different bands, was in a band called the Graham Bond Organization with Ginger, and John McLaughlin was in that band briefly as well. So all of these musicians in their formative careers before they became famous and successful on this kind of global level were playing around the UK circuit, just playing little gigs, you know. And then in 1966, they put Cream together. It was Ginger Baker's idea. He drove up to Oxford, which is like an hour and a bit outside of London, to see Eric. I believe Eric Clapton was performing with John Mayall that night, and then they went to the bar afterwards, and Ginger suggested to Eric, he said, "Oh, Eric, you know, I think you're amazing. Why don't we put a band together?" And Eric said, "Awesome. Only if you have Jack Bruce on bass." So you know, that's really the formation of Cream, and very quickly they sort of took off. And, you know, Hendrix, Chaz Chandler from the Animals discovered Jimi Hendrix in New York City and then brought him
didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, so then he brought him to the UK, and really Jimmy made it first in the UK. And very early on, maybe one of Cream's first 2 or 3 shows, Chaz took Jimmy along and asked if Jimmy could sit in with Cream. So Eric stood on the side of the stage and Jimmy played with my dad and Ginger. And this is all just on the cusp of them becoming famous, you know. And
amazing.
So the amazing thing about Cream is they were only together for about 2.5 years, from 1966 to the end of 68, really, kind of 2 years basically, and they created all this amazing music. So really, for us as the kids of those guys, we grew up with them. We learned so much from them. We do other kinds of music too. I've got my own career with my own music. I'm making a new record this year, and Rob Johnson, our newest member, he has his own band, and Kofi's done so many different things over the years as well. But this is just a way for us to celebrate our legacy, our family, you know, really. Eric's the only one that's still alive. My dad passed away 10 years ago. Ginger passed away in 2019. So, you know, this is a way for us to kind of pay homage to them in a kind of humble way. And I think, you know, the great thing is we did play with our dads, so we learnt from them. And it's so much based on improvisation, so we're able to take it in our own way. We're not a tribute band in the sense that we're repeating exactly the way they did it.
Yes. Right, and I want to make people very much aware of that. Right, fresh music. But it's interesting, you know, I've always been a big fan of Cream. And, you know, in my generation, I'm 69 years young, and I like the part young because I love this music. I love the British invasion. I loved all this time period. But honestly, Malcolm, not to sound like I'm kissing up here, I never thought I'd have the opportunity to talk to you. And now, again, not a tribute band at all, the sons of Cream. You, of course, and Kofi. And, of course, having this grandnephew, if I understand it, Ginger Baker, Robert Johnson on guitar. This needs to be expressed here. And I think this,
Sorry, Google loves Robert Johnson's name, because obviously when you type Robert Johnson into Google, a different Robert Johnson comes.
Exactly. I didn't think that was who it was.
AI tends to put a picture of the original Robert Johnson in place, you know, so we have a lot about that. But yeah, Rob's great. He's really talented. He's like a little younger than me and Kofi. He's the next generation down, and so he's the grandnephew with a son. So it's nice. It's so true that it's very fresh music. And I think what people don't understand about the original band Cream and their uniqueness was that they were also improvising. So they never played the songs the same way twice. They really just explored the blues idiom, but so much more than the blues idiom. There's all these different influences as well. And, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, my dad always would make a joke out of it. He famously said, Cream was a jazz band, we just didn't tell Eric. And, you know, in a way, that's kind of true. Like my dad and Ginger came from a jazz background, so it was second nature for them to just improvise and see where that journey would take them. And Eric was also like that in terms of the blues tradition, but it was so much more than the blues. And I think, you know, it stands the testament of time. It's this music doesn't sound dated. It doesn't sound like it's from the past. To me, at least, it sounds very contemporary in many ways, because we're able to explore each night we perform. It's different. It's a different performance of
absolutely
using the songs as a starting point. So yeah, it's exciting.
Well, Malcolm, I want to bring this up, and I think this is interesting. How do you like this? I'm going to describe your band from a lot of interviews that I've listened to, and of course, we have you here live in the session on the Dr. Sky Experience. How about this, ladies and gentlemen? The Sons of Cream, in my opinion, bringing the music together in a multi-dimensional pedigree like a living organism. How does that sit with you? I think that says a lot. How about that?
There you go.
Pretty good, huh?
I think that's a very nice... you know what? I might have even written that.
I know. So you can tell that I did some homework.
I like what you did with that. Yes, it was great.
There you go.
You know, I think it is. You know, I think, look, the greatest music is not, it's not fixed. You know, and we're not fixed. Humans are not fixed. We have the capacity to have deep spiritual experiences, to have that connection to the divine. And, you know, in this world, I think we need more of that. We need more of that kind of humility.
You bet.
You know, and that experience, however we want to frame it, whether it's religious terms or spiritual terms or whatever. And I think that music is a vehicle to gain access to those experiences, you know, in a world where we're increasingly being pushed into conformity of thinking. And, you know, so I mean, in my sense of it, you know, I'm always excited to act as without sounding too like big time about it. You know, it's like musicians can act as a conduit to that experience. If we can gain access to it ourselves, then I think it can become a shared experience with the audience. It's not an us or them thing. It's something that we share together. And, you know, if you get a great audience, the energy in the room rises up, you know, and there's a vibration.
You're right.
A cosmic vibration. There you go.
Well, that's what we talk about, Malcolm. You know, Dr. Sky talks about astronomy, space, aviation, weather, but in the universe, we talk about everything about the whole way the universe was created, and we respect religious beliefs. But the truth of the matter, isn't it amazing to talk about the vast unknown and how tiny we really are on this planet? As the great Carl Sagan, which I was fortunate enough to have met once in my life, he described the Earth as the pale blue dot in the cosmic void. But, you know, this is interesting, folks. We're here on Talk Radio 77 WABC with Cosmic Conversations and the Dr. Sky Experience today, a legend of music, a family of musicians that come from the late, great rock band Cream. This is, of course, a long time ago, but never forgotten. They are Sons of Cream, and if you're listening, I suggest you check them out at sonsofcream.com. They're coming out here to Phoenix, to the Music Museum, the Musical Instrument Museum, on March the 11th. Your travel schedule is here all through the United States and, of course, over to the other side of the pond from where we're sitting. But it's amazing, just amazing to have you here today. So what we're going to do right now, the audience is going to hear just a little bit of a rendition of your version, the Sons of Cream, of Crossroads. And I think this is fascinating because to me, if I just close my eyes, Malcolm, it sounds just like the original, and I love it. that was great, and the audience has just heard that. But, I just wanted to move on to talk with you about this. So talk a little bit about this whole experience. And I have to ask you the question. This is the most obvious question. I don't think I don't know the answer. Where did the name Cream come from? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's the origin of Cream?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is actually the original title for the band was The Cream, and then eventually the word "the" was dropped. But The Cream came from the idea that the band was the cream of the crop. They were,
there you go.
As I mentioned before, they were musicians on a circuit, on a scene of, and it was a burgeoning scene. It wasn't a scene of world famous people. It was a scene that there was a group of people that were increasingly getting into this music. It was American music that these British musicians had fallen in love with, the earlier generation of blues musicians like Albert King or Muddy Waters, who I mentioned, or Willie Dixon, all of these guys that they loved. And so, they eventually kind of cream rises to the top, as it were. And
there you go.
So, they were seen as, they were seen as musicians that were at the, the vanguard of something new. And so, it's a little bit of the arrogance of youth, maybe, to call themselves that. But hey, why not? And but eventually, eventually the word of "the" was dropped, and it just kind of became known as Cream. But my dad always said, actually it was The Cream. So maybe it's just easier to call it Cream. So there you go. But I think looking back, it's almost 60 years ago now. Like next year, it will be 60 years since the formation of this band.
Amazing, right?
So looking at how different the world is, it's interesting from that perspective to see what they achieved. And of course, there's been incredible music subsequent to that. But I think it stands up, and I think there's something about it that's so unique that has not really been bettered, within what they did. Lots of other bands have improvised. Lots of other bands have created music based on the blues idiom or whatever, or blues rock or whatever it's called. But they had something. I think a lot of it was to do with the chemistry between the three musicians, the individual personalities and how that kind of came together. Like all great bands, I think it's about that. It's about some kind of chemistry. And they weren't. I practice meditation and do yoga, and Kofi exercises at the gym, and so we live very differently from our parents, who kind of had to, this 60 years ago there was like drugs and certain kinds of behaviors, but even that, it's not about judging them. It's just about how the vibration of the universe has changed, and how more and more I think we resonate differently, and so to connect to, the way I look at it, I mean, I've seen the statistics about how many stars there are in the universe and what potentialities and all that. But really, the way I experience it, having spent years practicing transcendental meditation, the way I experience it more and more is like a hologram. So really, there is no individual here. There's just consciousness experiencing itself by creating the universe. And then individuals are like sets of characteristics that we can it's convenient to call it Malcolm, who's having a chat with you. And it's great to have that kind of experience, but really, in truth, it's just what's happening. And that's the thing, like music can get us in that place where we're experiencing things in a direct way rather than the abstractness of conceptualization. And so, music, as I said before, I find it as a vehicle to gain access to a deeper understanding. And it's not an intellectual understanding. It's not something you can put into words. It's something about joy and bliss and that sense of connectedness. So I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to, and also come to this amazing country of yours. Every time I come here to work, I just learn so much more. We're in San Antonio right now, going to play a show tonight in the center of town. It's a beautiful town, and the weather is beautiful, so I'm happy.
Beautiful. Well, Malcolm, you're like a brother to me, and hopefully I'm a brother of yours, because we talk about the same spirituality. And, unfortunately, the world, obviously, not to get into a political discussion, pro or con, but obviously we are celestial beings. And in my firm belief, I wonder what yours is, I believe the universe teems with life. And whether it's come here or not, let's hope that we can learn as what? If we keep making the same mistakes, why can't we simply all just get along, right, Malcolm?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's about respecting boundaries, and it's about allowing people to make their own choices, empowering people to become connected to the spiritual part of themselves, and without all these rules and regulations, get rid of as much of that as possible, and teach people to access the deeper part of themselves, which is the God part, the divine part of who we are. And once we connect to that, then all answers come through the intuition. And, so it's about letting go. It's about softening and letting go into the experience of nowness. And all answers are there. We don't need other people to inform us. Of course, we can learn so much from others, but that should ultimately, as adults, that should be our choice, what we kind of decide. Get less control, and also more love, more peace, more listening, more respect, and anyway, and also, like, the smallest thing can change everything. The smallest gesture, even this conversation, maybe somebody will hear it and understand that we're sharing something in this moment, and that can trigger something. So you never know.
That's right. A hug to somebody out there who feels, some sadness or something, or a handshake or a smile. But you know what, right now, before we end our show, sadly, with you, and I hope we can do this again, Malcolm, and obviously remind people here in the Phoenix Metro and all across the nation, they're coming to the Phoenix Big MIM, the Music Instrument Museum, March 11th. Visit that on the web, sonsofcream.com. But we're going to go back in the time machine right now, just so everybody, in case they're young enough and they don't know what the original Cream sounded like, exactly like you guys do with Sons of Cream. Let's go back to hear an original rendition of Crossroads at the Fillmore, San Francisco, way back in our time machine in 1968. Here's what it sounded like. And there you go, Malcolm. That's awesome. I really appreciate your time today and the spirituality behind this and the great story. How often, folks, do we get to hear a band that actually has the sons of also great musicians, they themselves, of course, exploring the same strength and power of the sound of music, which is what we need here. Our special guest has been Malcolm Bruce, bassist on vocals too. His dad, of course, the legendary Jack Bruce, was one of the most influential bassists of all time. Again, sonsofcream.com. And I want to thank our producer, Richard Dugan, Dr. D. You are listening to the Dr. Sky Experience, where on Talk Radio 77 WABC, the crown jewel of radio, the iconic 77 Talk Radio, WABC, beaming out of New York City, the nation, the world, and I'm sure the cosmos, heard in 173 countries and all 50 states. Malcolm, if you'd be so kind to stay on the line with us as we go to the hard break at the bottom of the hour. We always remind people to do what? Always remember to keep your feet on the ground and keep your eyes to the skies. And I'm your humble navigator on the highway to the heavens, Malcolm. That seriously, there are no tolls on that highway to explore the wonders of the universe. I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.